Okay, welcome everyone to the very first 2017 School Counselor webinar. It's Michelle Sutherland here with you today. I'm very happy to be here. We are doing a really important webinar today on working with students returning from a mental health crisis. I do have the registration up. If you would please go ahead and sign in right now. Even if you've already signed in on WebEx, we want you to sign in on this one as well because it's important that we know you're here so we can send you all the things that you need, the CEU and also the course evaluation form. So some of you might be having trouble signing in to the Google form that I'm sharing with you on this link. It would either be your web browser or it could be because it's blocked at your site. So you can go ahead and sign in on your phone, or you can sign in on a home computer this evening, whatever works out for you. Or you can send me an email. This is my email address. I'm not sure why the M is not highlighted for you, but that is me, Michelle Sutherland. My email address, michelle.sutherland@sde.ok.gov. You can send me an email if it's not letting you sign in. Let me know that you're here, and that would be great. So I'm going to put this up for one more minute, and then we're going to get started on our session today. I hope you guys had a fun ICE day, for those of you who had an ICE day. I'm sure some of you feel more behind now that you've had an ICE day, but I'm really glad that we are back working. I know I had to do a little bit of work over the long break for myself to be caught up, so I appreciate the fact that you probably did too. I'm excited to do this webinar, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Don't worry, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this URL in the chat box one more time so you can see it, but we are going to move on to our session today. So we're working with students returning from a mental health crisis. So the very first thing, maybe is the most important thing for me to share with you today. If you have a student returning from school after any kind of hospitalization, let's say they had the flu, or let's say that they had a cancer, or that they were in a car wreck, or for any reason they've been in the hospital, you would help them transition back to school. Truth? Truth. It is true. This situation with mental health is no different, and sometimes we can forget that a mental health hospitalization is just as serious, sometimes more serious, sometimes more life-threatening. So it's really important that no matter what we remember today, it's really important that you remember this part, that you need to work with students to transition if they're coming back from a mental health crisis. And obviously you want to do that because you signed up for this webinar, so I'm glad that you did, and we're going to get started. So let's define what a mental health crisis is. We're looking at, first of all, inpatient treatment, either for suicidal ideation or even a suicide attempt, or self-injury can also be a reason somebody goes inpatient. There are other reasons people might be inpatient too, if they're hearing voices, if they're experiencing some other kind of psychosis. That could cause an inpatient mental health treatment as well. They could have extreme anxiety, and I mean the kind of anxiety that means they cannot go to school because they're so anxious. Or they get to school, they won't get out of their car. Or they get out of their car and they make it into your office, but they just can't go to class. It's not the kids who are just trying to skip class and hang out with you. These are the kids, and you know the difference, who really just physically can't make themselves do it. Debbie, glad you got it. That works great. They could have a phobia that's preventing them from living a normal life of some sort. Phobia of crowds. I've had students who've had phobia of large groups of people, could not eat in the cafeteria. Some of them could not even stand to be in a large classroom setting, which made it difficult for them. Maybe they have obsessive compulsive disorder or something that falls into that category, or something like Tourette's. that's making it really difficult and they've been out of school for some period of time, or some other sort of crisis that I have not listed here today, and maybe you have, if you can think of something that I have not listed here today that we might be dealing with, go ahead and send it to me in the chat box now. So some of you are listening. I will share again the URL at the end to sign in. So we'll do that. So, okay, so during the crisis, and I think it's important that we address this because I still think we're learning a lot about how to respond in a crisis. The very first thing that you should do in a crisis, after making sure the student is safe, of course, is contact your parents or guardians immediately. Now, there are extreme cases when a counselor knows that it could cause a major problem to call the parents or guardians. Maybe it's because the parents and guardians are the problem. Maybe there's an abusive situation happening. Or maybe that you've called before and you're aware that the parents and guardians do not believe in mental health crisis or do not take their child seriously. Maybe there's some other extreme situation. It's those moments when you should call law enforcement to give you some help. But you should also call the parents and let them know what's going on, even if you have to wait till law enforcement gets there. So we can talk more about that at a different time. Provide as much information to the family as possible. And I'm talking about the resources that the family might need. There are some, I'll show you our crisis kit toward the end of our session, but we do have a list of mental health facilities that the parents could take their child to for a mental health evaluation. That would be a great resource. Any kind of local counseling supports that are there in your community that you should have a resource list of. I know some districts have a specific crisis list that they always send with the family. One thing I found very helpful too is to let families know that even though their children are minors, if they go for a mental health evaluation and they are deemed to be suicidal, the child is taken into protective custody. And even if the parents don't want to admit the child, if it's deemed that the child is in a mental health emergency and their life is at risk or their safety is at risk, they will be taken into protective custody and the parent will not be allowed to take them home at that point. And most parents don't know this. Even some providers don't know this. It's a pretty important thing that you let them know. If you are familiar with a facility, to let them know as much about that facility as possible. I would encourage you to go meet with your facilities and get a tour so you can see it and put eyes on it and be able to explain it and talk in an educated way about it. If that facility has a brochure that you can give to parents, that would be something really helpful, or a website. Just find out as much information as you can in advance. Other things that you should send with the family if possible, and these are things on our crisis kit on our website, which I'll show you at the end. A third-party affidavit is just a legal statement saying what the student has told you. Emergency notification form letting the family know that there is an emergency and you recommend a mental health evaluation. A list of treatment facilities or any other supports. And also, during the crisis, when you're meeting with the family, you should also ask for a reentry meeting at least one day before the student returns. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about at length today, is what that reentry meeting should look like. So, again, if you can't reach the parents or guardians, the police will take a student into protective custody. They will get the student to get a mental health evaluation. I will tell you, it is almost a guarantee that if a police officer takes a child into protective custody for a mental health evaluation, the mental health facility will keep them. I've never heard of it happening the other way. I guess it's possible that that could happen, but I would be surprised, very surprised if it did. Again, if parents or guardians will not take their son or daughter to receive the mental health evaluation, you should contact police and you should contact DHS because it is a child safety issue. I've made many DHS reports in that exact situation where the parents refused to take their child for treatment or did not follow up after a mental health crisis with counseling, something that's really needed. Don't be afraid to go ahead and make a DHS report at that time. Also, during the crisis, assure the student that his or her family that the school should be the last thing they're worrying about. Many times, especially with overachieving students who are kind of in a crisis, they are so worried about missing school or missing assignments or getting behind. That is the last thing they should be worrying about. And it is our responsibility as counselors to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure they're not in a bind when they come back to school, so that you can really say to them, this is true. You're not going to be in a bind. We're going to do everything we can to work with you. It should be the last thing that you're worried about. I've had students kind of go into crisis before finals, and we are able to freeze their grades so they don't have to take finals. They can't wrap their brain around the fact that they're not going to have to take a final, but that is something that you can do, is you can freeze their grades in a mental health crisis. Assure the student and his or her family that absences will be excused. This is something you should work with your attendance secretary on. It is helpful to have a doctor's note, but if for some reason the family is concerned about getting a doctor's note for some reason, work with your principal to get it to be principal excused. If it's a privacy issue, if there's an extenuating circumstance, but always excuse their absences in a mental health crisis. Assure the student and his or her family that you will work with them and with the other staff to help transition back. And ask the family what is okay to tell the need-to-know staff members. And when I say need-to-know staff members, that is not your entire staff. So you wouldn't go to a staff meeting and tell everybody on staff. Or you wouldn't even really tell a teacher who did not have the child in class. You would tell the student's teachers, potentially a coach, their IEP, teacher of record. You may, attendance secretary or principal, you may think of some other people in a specific situation who might need to know, but ask them what is okay. Now you're going to need to tell them something. And sometimes when the family was not comfortable stating what the situation was exactly, they would let me say something like, Janie had an emergency and is in the hospital and will be back in 5 to 7 days. And generally speaking, when I told a staff member that, they could read between the lines enough to know what I was talking about. Oops, sorry about that. They could read between the lines to know. And I think that's why it's important to talk to your staff members ahead of time, to let them know, because of the student's privacy, that you're not always going to be able to give all the details. And sometimes they want more privacy. And many times after the fact, after the mental health inpatient treatment, the student will tell the teachers themselves what happened. But going into it, especially if it's a family who's never experienced anything like this, they may be reluctant to share personal information. Now, our duty as counselors is to show empathy, which you guys are the best at, to provide a safe space for the student, advocacy with other staff members, communication with the parents and guardians, and explaining the options for students. And when I say that, it is really our responsibility to think outside the box in order to help students. And we'll talk specifically about what some of those things might be, but it's going to look different on each of your campuses. Everybody's campus has its own unique things. The building might be an issue in some way. Just like if you wouldn't send a student in a wheelchair upstairs without an elevator, you wouldn't send a student with a mental health issue back into another equally impossible situation for them. So thinking outside the box is really important when we talk about our duties as counselors. I can't really show you this awesome video, but it is on our website, and I will show you in our crisis kit. But it's talking about empathy, and it's Brene Brown on empathy. A quick summary of this video, which I like to show in all of my presentations because it's so darn good. Basically, it talks about being with someone. And sometimes when someone tells you something, if you don't know what else to say, what you can say is, man, I don't know what to say, but I'm so glad you told me. It's not saying at least. So if a student says, you know, my life is falling apart, my parents are getting a divorce, you wouldn't say something like, well, at least you have parents. Or my boyfriend broke up with me, and I don't know how I'm going to go on with life. Well, at least you're going to grow up someday and not even care about this. And you won't even care about this when you're 25 years old. Not things that are empathetic to say. An empathetic response would be something like, oh man, I can see why you're upset. I am so sorry you're going through this. I know how hard this must be for you. Even if you don't totally relate, saying some affirming words like that is going to be really helpful for your students. So please take your time. It's a 3-minute video. Watch it whenever you're on your own time. It's worth your time, I promise. So when we're talking about providing a safe space for students, the student needs to have permission to check in with you and to see you anytime. Anytime. Some students have cards they have on their desk that if they don't want to ask their teachers, some students have trouble asking teachers, they just show their card and maybe it's just a green square. It doesn't even have anything written on it. That you know, the teacher knows, and you know that whenever the student gives the teacher the green square that they're going to go see you. So that's one way to do it. But if you're concerned about a student coming in too much, check for a pattern. Is it always during 4th hour that the student is coming in? If it is always during a 4th hour, what is going on in there? Is there something making that student uncomfortable? Do they just not like the subject? Is the teacher someone who is not helping them or not able to empathize with them? And is that a teacher you can teach about empathy and how you can help the student? If you have a frequent flyer, which is what I kind of call them, which I know you guys will relate to, you might set a timer. So I would have frequently some students who were in a mental health situation and just needed to touch base. So I would ask them, okay, I'd like to set a timer for you for when it's up, you go back to class. You know, how much time do you think you need? I might ask them that question. They might say 2 minutes, and I go, well, let's give you 5 minutes. Or you might have a student that say 60 minutes, and you go, well, let's try 30 and see how you are at the end of 30. Just setting a timer, I set it on my phone. You could set an egg timer, a kitchen timer of some sort, whatever that looks like for you. Setting a timer and sending a student back to class is okay because it is showing the student what's going to happen. It's setting the expectation, and then it's following through. Now, at the end of that time, if the timer goes off and they still can't go back to class, that's okay. Just reset the timer. Work with them as much as you can, and at some point, the time will get shorter and shorter, and eventually the goal would be for them to not need to come and see you. But one thing, another thing you can do is to do check-in, check-out, and we've talked about this before in some of our other sessions if you've tuned in before. Have the student either check in and check out with you at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, or with a trusted teacher or staff member, and always have a backup plan in case you're not there for some reason. So that when they check in, all they do is they come to you and you say, hey, how was your night last night? How's it going today? How are you feeling? You can ask them to give you a rating on a scale from 1 to 5, from 1 being terrible to 5 being best day ever. Where are you this morning? You could give them a little sheet of paper where they could rank themselves every day, and they could rank themselves in each class if you wanted to. A great resource that I'll type into our chat box is pbisworld.com. I have a little song that goes with it. pbisworld.com. So it's a great one, well, that can help you talk about check-in, check-out, and a lot of other resources. If you've never seen this website, it's a fantastic one. I would really encourage you to use sometime in your own time. Check into it. You will not be sad that you did. It's free, and it's just full of a ton of wonderful resources. And there's a lot of information about check-in, check-out. You can also set other regular times to touch base, like every Thursday during advisory. Have a standing appointment where they come see you. Or you know that you're going to check in with them every Friday before they go home for the weekend and every Monday when they get back to school. It's whatever works for you and the student is what you're going to set up. Now, I would have trouble remembering these things, just to be honest. So what I would have to do is put it on my calendar and have a reminder sent to my phone, because otherwise it's just easy to forget. I know how busy each of you are. So you could also set that up with a secretary. We had a great secretary in our office who would do check-in, check-out with students. somebody who really fit the bill. Now, some of your secretaries might not fit the bill, and you will know the difference, but a favorite teacher, another counselor or administrator can be your backup plan, or the first line of defense, and you can be the backup plan, either way. So providing that safe space is really important for the students. So they know that if they are having a hard day or having hurtful thoughts, that they can come and talk to you about it, and that you're their safe person. So advocacy with other staff, very important. This is what I talked about earlier, training your teachers in advance. Ask your principal to set up a meeting or some time set aside for you with your next staff meeting, and talk to your teachers about what is acceptable and what should be expected when a student is returning from a mental health crisis. All things that you should tell them. I will only tell the people who need to know. I will only tell you what's okay with the family for you to know. I will ask you for some things for the student based on what they need. And we will always have a reentry meeting when a student comes back to school, which we are going to talk about. So tell the teachers, secretaries, principals only what they need to know, which we talked about. Get that permission from the family. Really important. I can't emphasize this enough, and this is the hardest thing for teachers to understand from my experience, is have the students do on what they missed from when they were gone, only the essential assignments. You might need to help the teachers figure out the difference between essential and non-essential, or reduce their assignments, or shorten their assignments. If it's math and they really need to do all the worksheets, and have them do 5 problems instead of 25. Work with your teachers and ask them to reduce the assignments, just like you would with a student who is hospitalized for some other reason. You wouldn't want them to come back to a pile of work. Even in high school, this is okay. I promise. I know your teachers are going to say, we have certain standards that we have to meet. It's okay. Work with your teachers. Have them know in advance what you're going to ask for, which is essential assignments only, so they'll be thinking about that already. Make sure the absences are excused, and consider a 504 plan, or an IEP for that matter, but there should never be a student who is hospitalized for any reason where you wouldn't need a 504 plan to be considered. So especially students with a chronic condition, like a mental health issue, a 504 plan should always be considered, so you don't have to fight teachers to get the accommodations you need. Even if teachers are very accommodating, a 504 plan protects them from if they move districts, or if they change schools, or if they promote to the next grade, or whatever the situation is. A 504 plan just protects your students, and if they can get a doctor's note, then that should be considered. You know, a diagnosed mental health condition is no different than a student with another chronic condition, like diabetes, or cancer, or a severe allergy. All these things you would consider a 504 plan. The accommodations are needed, and medications might even be needed to be taken at school. And while you don't have to have a 504 plan for that, it is really helpful, and it's just another safety and a protection that you can put in place for your students. So that's why I think you should consider a 504 plan. Talking about communication with parents and guardians. You always want to contact the family the same day and or day after the crisis. And what I mean by that is, if the child is in crisis, you always contact them the same day, but you also might follow up the next day. Now, I always ask families to contact me and let me know if the student was put inpatient, and many times they would, but if I didn't hear from them, I always would call the next day and just check and see where they were and if everything was okay and if they needed anything else. So contacting the family the same day after the student is inpatient, or even the next day, is appropriate and something that I would do if it were me. And again, don't be afraid to set a reminder on your phone or on your computer. Put it on your calendar. We're all really busy. We have 1,000 things that we're doing, but these are really, really important things that we need to do for our students who have experienced a mental health issue. Contact that family to set up a transition meeting. You kind of need to know when the student is going to be returning to school. Setting it up before the student comes back to school is really important. Greet the family and the student before the meeting. Let them feel comfortable and safe. Let them know you've already spoken to teachers and the teachers are going to be nice. A lot of students can be afraid their teacher might be mean. If you have a teacher who's not going to be nice, that's a conversation you and your principal should have, so the principal can handle that. That's the principal. You can talk to them too, but the principal's job is to ensure that they're nice and do the right thing for the student. And you have to be the touchstone with the family once the student returns. Even in the elementary setting where the students only have one teacher, it's really important that the family is able to get a hold of you, and you're much more available than a teacher for the most part. It's important that if they have multiple teachers, you have to be the person who's the touchstone, because it's hard to let all those teachers know. So being the touchstone, being the person they call or email, letting them know their concerns, touching base with them, checking in, all the things that should be in our responsibilities as counselors. Explaining the options to the family member, really important. Considering the 504 plan as a team. Is this appropriate? It might not be. You might have a student who just stressed themselves out to the point of self-injury or suicidal ideation, and they come back and it's not a chronic condition for them, and maybe you would not put them on a 504 plan. But more often than not, your student is going to have a chronic issue, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, some other chronic condition that would make them eligible for a 504 plan. And thinking outside the box, what we talked about right at the beginning, whether they're on a 504 plan or not. So the regular touch base, adjust their schedule. Would it be better for them to have language arts in the morning and math in the afternoon, or vice versa? Would it be better for them to have a different explo or elective class? Would it be better for them to shorten their day? We've had lots of students before who've had shortened days, and it's been really helpful to them. Would it be better if they're in the alternative setting because it's a smaller setting? All things that you can talk about to adjust their schedule. And with a 504 plan, you can do all those things. You can adjust and shorten their day, and that might be something that they need. They can modify their assignments and their work. Even after they come back, you might say, math is really stressing Tom out. It's really stressing him out. So, and it's just the amount of work, and he's not very fast. So instead of doing the whole assignment every day, he's going to do every other problem. Just thinking outside the box, what works for them. Thinking about transition times, which are, we know that children of trauma have really huge struggles during a transition, the hardest time for them. So you have transition all the time at a school setting. And I'm not just talking about passing period or going to and from class. There's transitions built in the class. So what would that look like to help your student? Letting them know what the next transition is going to be. Having the teacher provide a short schedule for the student to let them know what's going to come up for the whole week. Taking them out of the passing period time so they're not in with a million students trying to struggle to class. Let them go to class 2 minutes early or 2 minutes after the bell finishes. What about eating lunch in the office with a couple of friends instead of in the cafeteria? All ideas that could help a student really feel more safe and secure, and that's what we all want when we talk about students going to school, is feeling safe and secure. And we know that until students feel safe and secure, they cannot learn. So we're trying to think, what does the student really need? And exploring all of those options. Now, a question that I get a lot, are animals allowed? Now, there are different kinds, there's 3 really kinds of animals that we're going to talk about: a service animal, a therapy animal, and an emotional support animal. What's the difference? Can I have them at my school? I'll tell you that it's pretty much a local decision unless it's a service animal. A service or an emotional support animal require the student to have a 504 or an IEP. If you have a student approach you and say, I have a dog that I want to bring to school with me, or a small horse, or a cat, or whatever it might be, dog is by far the most likely, you're going to say, I need a 504, we need to write a 504 or an IEP to make sure that happens. I had a student who I work with extensively in this situation, so I have some frame of reference about this. An impairment must be documented by a doctor, almost like a prescription. I had this student had an emotional support animal. The difference between a service animal and an emotional support animal: a service animal provides some sort of service. Maybe the student is legally blind. Maybe they detect panic attacks. Maybe the service animal, the student has a physical disability and the service animal is helping them in some physical way. Those are service animals. Emotional support animals are different in where they are there to just emotionally support the student. They don't have another type of job. Does that make sense? So my student that I work with extensively had an emotional support animal. She had a little dog, super cute little dog, very sweet. The animal has got to be trained, and there are different levels of training. Service animals go through a rigorous several-month process. They're usually trained by outside agencies and given to a student or a family. An emotional support animal, there's really not training for an emotional support animal. There are trainings they can go to, but obviously things like the animal needs to be potty trained, the animal needs to not be aggressive, the animal needs to be able to obey specific simple commands like sit and stay. It needs to not bark all the time. It needs to have some obedience training. That can be done at a bunch of different places, and that's just something you can search in your local area to see what kind of obedience classes are offered if you have someone inquiring about it. So those two things, emotional support and service, require 504s or IEPs. Therapy animals are different. I have a therapy dog, and I'll show you a picture in just a second of my dog Buddy. A therapy dog is not for someone with a disability. They're for the service provider, which you would be. And if you are interested in a therapy dog, I want you to email me, and I can send you some more information. But the animal and the handler must be certified. You have to have a certified animal. There are different agencies around Oklahoma who do certification. For me, my dog and I went to a 6-week class, one night a week for 6 weeks, about an hour and a half a night, that basically taught me how to handle my animal in a therapy dog type setting. It is a district decision on whether or not they will let you have a therapy dog. In fact, sometimes it's a billing decision, and what I can tell you is my principal did not want me to have a therapy dog, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed until finally the superintendent found out that I wanted to have a therapy dog, and he was for it, and so I got my therapy dog. And then the district moved to some decisions about how therapy dogs should look in the district. I had a certification. This is me and Buddy. He was Superman and I was Wonder Woman for Halloween one year. He is a black lab border collie mix. There's really not a specific type of information that dog that you have to have. It just has to be a dog with a good temperament. I do privately insure Buddy and myself as a counselor to make sure that in case somebody came after me, I did have a student wave a wet floor sign at me one time, and Buddy did growl at him and get in between us. So in case Buddy did bite in a situation where I was threatened or some other weird situation, that he was insured and I was insured. You know, I love taking Buddy to school with me. He was a great resource. I watched him immediately de-escalate people over and over and over again. I could tell you a bunch of stories about him. But it is also a lot of work and something you have to be committed to. I mean, dogs can't tell you they need to go to the bathroom, so you kind of need to take them out a couple of times a day. Buddy has a perfect dog for one-on-one or small group settings, but he does not like big crowds. So I couldn't really take him to lunch duty with me. I also would not want to take him in a passing period situation. I did let him see some smaller children when the children were prepped and were quiet and calm. You might have another dog who doesn't mind big crowds. It all depends on the dog. So there are pros and cons to having a therapy dog. I will tell you that they're great in grief settings as well. People will lay on the floor and pet a dog when they might not want to talk to a human. So they're a great thing to have, but grief settings are pretty stressful. And if you're in charge of a care station, I wouldn't recommend taking your dog. I would recommend you being available to somebody else's care station and taking your dog. But if you're the person in charge, I would not recommend it. It's just a lot of work. So, and again, any dog can be a therapy dog if they have the right temperament. So A little bit about therapy dogs. So let's talk about student reentry planning. You want to set the appointment with the parent as soon as possible for the student to reenter. Now, if the student is admitted and the hospital says it looks like 5 to 7 days and the student will be released, or if the hospital says, I'm not sure, this could be long-term, you just kind of need to find out when the student is coming back. The hospital might not tell the parents, or the parents might not know to ask, so it might be a thing where you're setting it up for the next day, but setting that appointment as soon as possible to do a reentry planning meeting. I would also talk on the phone with the parent about what will happen in the reentry planning meeting so they know what's coming and they can think about it. Find out that date when the student wants to return to school. Take into consideration things like tests and finals. So if the student has just come out of an inpatient, I would tell you the worst thing you could do is send them back into a stressful situation immediately. It just could cause them to relapse. And there is a high incident rate of relapse for students who were just kind of thrown back in without any kind of transition. So take those things into consideration. And if they're out of the hospital but they need to stay out another week, that's okay. Do what's best for the student and have your district work with them. Also, you want to let teachers know ahead of time what you're going to be asking of them, especially in that meeting, and so they can come prepared to that meeting. So things you could ask a teacher for or two. You could ask them to forgive that non-essential assignments. Really, really important, and things that I find that teachers are sometimes reluctant to do. So talking to them ahead of time about that is going to really help your case. Working with students on deadlines and makeup work. So extend their deadline. I know you might have a school policy about you get 1.5 days for every day you miss. Maybe you change that for the student and it's 3 days. Whatever it is, work with them. Modifying assignments in the future, shortening the school day, all those things you could be asking of the teachers. You might also find out you have one teacher who is really empathetic, who really wants to touch base with that student every day. Allow that to happen if the student is comfortable with that. So you just need to kind of know your staff, know your teachers, and let them know what you're going to be asking them for. What you're going to need, and I'm going to show you all these things, a signed release of information on the mental health provider. So you already have at your school, I'm sure, a release of information form. If you don't, let's talk about it. But a release of information form, I'd be surprised if you don't. And this is going to be in your 504 or your IEP, so you can just use that same form where you ask the family if it's okay for you to talk with a mental health provider. Back and forth, and that could be really beneficial to you, and that has happened a lot in the students that I've seen. You would need a student safety plan if the student has been suicidal. You may or may not need it, but I sure want to bring it to the table and ask the student and the parent, I'd feel good if we did this. How about you? You'd want to invite all interested parties to the meeting, to the reentry meeting. Teachers, principal, you could invite the student's mental health provider if you wanted to, coaches, IEP teacher of record, the family, etc. Another trusted adult at the school, maybe it's a cafeteria worker, maybe it's the secretary, I'm not sure who it might be, maybe it's a TA. Whoever would be appropriate to be at that meeting, you invite them. And you get information ahead of time about it, a 504 plan or an IEP, whichever is appropriate. And you also let the parents know that you're going to do that and kind of tell them what a 504 is and why it would be beneficial for their student. So this is the safety plan, and I'm going to show you where this is online. But a safety plan is really good for you to fill out, not just with students returning from a mental health crisis, but if you have a student who is self-injured and maybe doesn't go inpatient, this would be a good one. Or a student who's maybe had thoughts of suicide before but is not currently suicidal, this would be a good thing to fill out with them. So what I do is I make a couple of copies. I make one for the student and one for myself in a private file that I keep in my desk, not in their cumulative folder. And I also, if I make a safety plan, I get permission from the student to share that with their parent. Now, if they are self-injured and you find out about it, or if they've ever been suicidal, that is something that you're required to tell the parent because it's a safety issue. But get the student's permission to tell them that you have a safety plan. The parent will be grateful. You might even make a copy for the parent if it's appropriate. So what are my warning signs that a crisis may be developing? Maybe they notice their stomach starts to hurt, Or maybe they notice that they can't catch their breath, or they feel lightheaded, or they have racing thoughts. You get them to decide whatever that is, and they write it down. And what are some ways I can help myself at school? So this could be a breathing technique. This could be going to your safe place. This could be talking to your safe person. It could be a number of different things. And it could be talking to my friend or putting music on in my ears. And that could be an accommodation, by the way, on a 504. If you have teachers who are pretty strict about no music, but you have a student who really needs music to help them self-calm, you could put that in the 504 plan. All kinds of things can go into that 504 plan. The rest of it are, who are the people I call if I need help? They put down the phone number of their safe people, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, a friend. You encourage them not to put young adults down because young adults sometimes are not capable of helping in the way that they need help. But who are those people? What are those phone numbers? Who will I call in case of an emergency? There, it gives them the call 911. Here's the suicide hotline number, and then the number to the local hospital where you are. So that's a really simple safety plan. There's some other ones you could Google and find online, but that's a really simple one. So at the meeting, at the student reentry meeting, you will need to know, what are the family's concerns about reentry? What are the academic concerns? What are the mental health provider concerns? What does the mental health provider recommend? Always a really important question we forget to ask sometimes. Have they been enrolled in someplace else during their treatment? So some students who are out for a short period of time, but it's usually a longer period of time, they're out, they could be enrolled there at the same facility and do school in that facility. So you could have dropped them, and they don't have to make up anything if that's the case. Getting that doctor's note, all important. Ask the teachers to bring a list of work the student needs to make up. And remember to ask for that non-essential items to be excused. So walking to the table and having the teacher with them already would be really helpful in the long run. So we actually have a student reentry plan form that I'll show you where this is on our website. You're going to get some basic information. Then you're going to talk about where the meeting is, the date they're returning to school. Do you have a signed release of information from a mental health provider? It's just a good checklist. Is that person present? Is the parent or guardian present? And if the parent or guardian won't come, have the meeting anyway with the student and the teachers. Is the student safety plan? Some say must complete before reentry. You don't have to necessarily do that, but that's a good plan of action. Is the student on a 504 or IEP plan, or should they be? So that is there a daily check-in? Who are they checking in with? The rest of the form, you write down family concerns, academic concerns, all the people present at the meeting, and then modification and course assignments. So you can write this down and it acts as a document that you can keep track of. So the course names, can the course actually be modified, yes or no? I mean, sometimes you just can't, but most of the time you can. Then on the back of the form, it's going to have several different sections like this, where you write the name of the course, the teacher, and what the modification is in the classroom. So you're writing in the modification for every class. You're going through it teacher by teacher. After teachers get used to doing this, they're going to be much better at it, and they're going to think ahead. They're going to have some experience, and they're going to get really good at it. So I'm going to take you right now to the website and show you where all this information is. You guys have probably all been to our website, but just in case you haven't, the way I like to get there is go to counselor, and there's our counseling. Takes us to our counseling website, right? So here we are. Click on Prevention Education and scroll down just a little bit, and it's our crisis kit. So it has all of the forms that I've talked to you about today, plus some other ones that you can look at to see if they might be beneficial for you. One that I talked to you about, the safety plan. Right here, you can print it off and use it. Another one that I didn't talk about that you could use is a safety threat assessment. If you're worried about the student and you're sitting down with them wanting to know how serious their situation is, you can use the safety threat assessment. And then obviously the student reentry plan is right here. So it's 2 pages. That's what it looks like. And there are many other things that we talked about today, the emergency notification form, the third-party affidavit. There's even a counselor process for responding to suicide ideation. It kind of walks you through, especially if it's a child that you are familiar with and you know, or has some sort of thing that's you're close to their family and it's kind of rattles you. It's a great checklist to pull out and use. Here's that video, Brene Brown on empathy, right down here at the bottom to watch in your own time. I really encourage you guys to do that. So you can look at that crisis kit. It's under prevention, under counseling. Here, if you did not register earlier, here is the website, and I'm going to put it in the comment section again for you guys to use in case you're going to go to the comments. There it is in the comment section. If you're just listening and not watching anything, the website is http://tinyurl.com/OSDE webinar and then the number 6. If you want more information about anything we talked about today, if you have questions, if you want to call me, if you want information on therapy dogs or on service animals or emotional support animals and you need some clarification, please email me. Here's my email address, michelle.sutherland@sde.ok.gov. You can call me, although I'm hard to reach because I'm out of my office quite a bit. It's 405-521-2106. Emailing me is a much more efficient way to get in touch with me. Much easier for me to respond to email than it is to catch your call. So does anybody have any questions? You can type them in on the chat box right now. If you have any questions, I'll be answering questions for the next 10 minutes or so. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Be sure to sign in so I can send you a CEU. And also, I have a survey that I'm going to send to you. It's not only a course evaluation, it's a survey. We have 5 questions at the end of the survey that we are needing to ask you because we're looking into some other ways that we can best support you. So please fill out that survey. It'll take you 5 minutes or less. So when will the CEUs be emailed to you? As soon as I get them back from the licensing board, hopefully today or tomorrow would be my guess. So probably today or tomorrow is when I will email you your CEU. So any other questions, comments? Thank you, Debbie, for your comment. Anything else that I can do for you? Any other supports that I can provide for you? Anything else you wish I could have talked about today or you want me to talk about now? Can you tell me if there will be another one? She said, I missed the training on forming a crisis teams. Can you tell me if you'd be another one? We have it online. Our Building a Crisis Team is online on our website that I just showed you under training. And we have great, exciting, wonderful crisis team training coming up across the state. 10 different trainings. It's free. It's a day long. You can find that information under our training tab on our counseling website that I just showed you. We're at different regional locations across the state. And I would really encourage you to sign up. There are a few spots left. We have 906 people signed up right now from 180 districts, which is a lot. We want you to come and bring your crisis team in your district. So you can watch that Building a Crisis Team online now, and you can sign up for a crisis team training now too. So thanks for your comment, Vanessa. Thanks, Janice. Anything else that you'd like to ask? Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it. Really happy that you guys came and tuned in today. Our next session will be in February. It's Teen Dating, Violence, and Sexual Assault. You can sign up now, and it's February 6th, I think. And you can find out all the information about all the trainings we provide on our training website under the Counseling tab on the State Department of Education website where I just took you. So find out about all those. You can sign up for any of those trainings. You can sign up for all of our spring webinars now if you want to, and I'll send a reminder the day before always. So thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great day, are able to get caught up. Hope you got to sit down and have your lunch and get some training today. And I will talk to you again really soon. Have a great day.